Speaker, and it's an honour and a pleasure to follow the honourable member for the Don Valley, who gave an extraordinarily compelling and principled speech. This is a critically important bill. We cannot in any logical way leave the European Union if we can continue to subject ourselves to EU law, EU courts and regulators. And it's for exactly that reason that we will have members of this place who will use this bill as an opportunity to try to scupper that process, to try and prevent our leaving the European Union. And that does worry me. In perhaps the most important, certainly the biggest democratic exercise that this country has ever seen, people voted to leave. And I believe it's true that 80% of the people who voted in the general election voted for parties that were pledged to honour the result and the outcome of the referendum. Now, if that promise is broken, I believe the resulting anger will give rise to extreme political movements right across the UK that will change our politics forever. So improve this bill at the next stage, report stage, committee stage, but to stop this bill on principle is, in my view, playing with fire. Now, I just want to briefly comment on one aspect, one area that is going to be impacted by our leaving the European Union, and that area is the environment, the natural environment. It's an area where the opportunity to do great things is almost incalculable. It is a chance not only to right some wrongs, but to make historic progress. The Common Agriculture Policy, for example, vast amounts of public money being handed to wealthy landowners simply because they own land, perverse incentives to harm the environment, shutting off the UK market to developing countries through higher tariffs. Environmentalists, farmers' organisations and a whole succession of farming ministers have dreamt for years of changing, reforming, profoundly reforming the Common Agriculture Policy. Well, we now can, and we must. We will be able to ensure that the subsidy system, the subsidy regime that replaces the CAP, both supports food production and improves and protects the natural environment. A system of public money for genuinely in return for public goods. It is an opportunity to raise standards and boost our rural economy at the same time. And it's not just the CAP that provides an opportunity. As a country, we've led the way on animal welfare, but we have been limited in what we can do through our membership of the European Union. We cannot, for example, yes, please. Yeah, please do.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for giving way. For example, on leaving the European Union, we can look to ban the live export of animals from our ports, which causes great suffering. That would be an animal welfare benefit.
I thank the honourable member for making that point. It's a point I was just about to make. But it's even been the case. It has even been the case that CAP funds have been used to subsidise bullfighting in Spain. I think I'm not going to take any more interventions. Most critically, even while we apply high animal welfare standards on our own production here in the country, we cannot apply those standards to the food that we import. And what that means is instead of preventing cruelty, which is what we're trying to do, we're simply exporting that cruelty to other countries while disadvantaging our own farmers at the same time. That is something that we can address as well. Now, clearly, in other areas, the European Union has been a good thing for the environment, and I would not pretend otherwise. The EU has undoubtedly been instrumental in forcing us to clean up our act. Our rivers and our beaches, for instance, are cleaner today because of the EU than they would have been. And that is why, I won't give way, that is why a core responsibility of this Parliament, of this government, is to ensure that those key EU regulations, the Habitats Directive, the Birds Directive, the Sewage Sludge Directive, have absolute, meaningful, proper, full protection in British law. Now, we've had that commitment. I'd like to have that commitment a few more times, if I could, over the course of this debate for ministers. But there are legitimate concerns about this process, and I think they need to be addressed in the wind-up by ministers at the end of this process. First, when a state fails to implement, I'm going to run out of time, others. When a state fails to implement EU law, there are penalties today. And that will no longer be the case, for obvious and appropriate reasons. But an alternative system does need to be introduced. If this or a future government fails, for example, to stay within air pollution limits, it must be possible for sanctions to be applied. It must be possible for the government to be held to account. That is a core ingredient in any healthy democracy. Second, it is not clear that important principles like the polluter pays principle or the precautionary principle will be fully absorbed, meaningfully absorbed into UK law. Well, they must be. If the individual regulations are to have meaning, then those principles need to be embedded in UK law. And finally, the bill enables the government to transfer regulatory functions from the EU to domestic bodies, but it does not oblige that to happen. And this seems to me to be an obvious weakness in the bill. So as the Minister responds to the issues raised today, I hope he will answer these concerns, provide reassurances either that these issues will be addressed in later stages of this bill or that they'll be addressed in subsequent environmental legislation. Thank you.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.